The latest World Economic Forum's risk report says adverse technological advances, involuntary migration, the erosion of social cohesion and geo-economic confrontation are the main risks that are facing the world over the next 5 to 10 years. The WEF says climate action failure and extreme weather are among the top risks in the short term. For us in South Africa, the year started with storms that resulted in loss of life and have caused millions of rands of damage to infrastructure and property. Now, the tropical storm Ana killing dozens of people in Madagascar and in Mozambique, leaving most of Malawi without power just in the past few days. To unpack these and other risks that are facing Africa, I'm joined now by Kingsley Makhubela of RiskRecon South Africa. Dr. Makhubela, thank you very much for your time and I appreciate your presence here on eNCA. Now, risk, I mean, there's different types of risks. I've just alluded to some that have been picked up by the World Economic Forum. For example, weather-wise, Southern Africa currently reeling, or parts of it, northern Mozambique, all the way to Malawi earlier this week with Tropical Storm Ana. We are also counting the cost of the damage of the storms in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Free State and the Eastern Cape recently. So just at a high level, when we look at our continent, what is going to be, in your view, the biggest risk for us in 2022?
Good afternoon, Dan, and good afternoon to your viewers. The biggest challenge that we are faced with in the continent are clearly identified also by the World Economic Forum. This prolonged economic stagnation, lack of growth in the continent, challenges related to unemployment, a question of failure of public infrastructure, and the proliferation of illicit trade that is going on. These are the challenges that mainly we're looking at. Not only that, Raden, you would have seen in the last few years political instability and the military in Ouagadougou. These are the challenges that we're going to be faced with in the continent. The challenge in the Horn of Africa, the conflict that is going on between the Tigray and movement and the Ethiopian government, and generally the problem in the Sahel area that relates challenges in Mali and so on. So the issue of conflict resolution during the course of pandemic, it's a huge challenge to the continent.
So the whole issue of the economy, of course, will feed into the challenges that a larger part of the continent is dealing with, like, for example, poverty.
Absolutely, Raden. Poverty, issues of human security that relates to basic needs of people. It's going to be a huge challenge moving forward. Coming from the pandemic, we're still reeling from the challenges imposed in the entire continent by the pandemic. And I think the pandemic came at a time also when our economies were not doing well. I mean, if you look at us as South Africa, when the pandemic came, we were growing, or projected to grow at about 2.1, but we went to negative growth, but we're now picking up, coming out of those issues. But the biggest challenge again for us in South Africa is to manage issues of corruption and building the capacity of the state. I mean, I see what WEF is saying are issues, I mean, that are going to affect a lot of countries. They've done a survey that includes Germany and other developed countries, and they're identifying similarities. But the challenge that we are having in South Africa is that our state institutions are weak, particularly at the local government level. We at RiskRecon are doing a research on the implication of what we've seen recently in the local government and the long-term effect it has in the sustainability of our state institution. And we picking up very serious concerns that ought to be addressed at this early stage.
Now, the other risk I've picked up, and I just want your quick insight on it as we conclude, Ambassador Makhubela, is social cohesion. It's also being identified as one of the top risks in the world, which has been exacerbated by the pandemic.
Social cohesion is the biggest challenge. During the pandemic, you would have seen here in the country, for instance, we've lost about 20% of our spending powers. And it is projected that we'll lose 5% more. Now, those things are compounding the social challenges that we're having as a country, not only us around the continent, because where you're having poor economic development and economic stagnation, the social cohesion challenges are much more highlighted. Germany will be cushioned because Germany is the same boat according to the World Economic Forum. But it will be cushioned by the fact that they're highly developed and they have better reserves. And we've had serious challenges as a country, and developing countries in general are going to find it very difficult to deal with the social consequences of the pandemic.
If we had to look into the immediate future after what we saw in July here, should we brace ourselves for more social unrest?
We need to address issues related to human security. Remember, the social unrest arises as a result of uncertainty. And uncertainty fuels that, and it provides the fertile ground for this kind of unrest to happen. We are already picking up serious concerns here in the country around the question of the challenges between the illegal immigrant or immigrant and locals. So those challenges are going to really put a lot of strain in terms of resources of the state to respond to them. And remember, there's a conflict in nature between the locals and foreigners. And they put a serious strain on resources of the state and the capacity of the state to respond to those issues. So these issues are really going to be very serious to look at them, but we need to deal with the question of poverty. Some of the issues are our own making, Braden, around issues of corruption and so on. I mean, I was reading the findings of the SIU on the PPE procurement. It raises serious concern about what has been going on within our state institutions. Now, if we don't address those issues, they're going to compound in terms of our resources. Now, with the challenge that we're having, that we're spending more than 30% of our resources in the wage bill, so meaning that we're left with very little to spend in terms of addressing social issues on the ground.